What really happened in Syria? What if I told you that the fall of the Assad regime had been planned, tested, and executed? Let me break it down in this video. The fall of the Assad regime was not an overnight event. It was the culmination of years of planning, testing, and execution by external and internal actors. In just 14 days, the regime had crumbled. Why did Syria fall? There are four core reasons. First is the role of external actors, and first among them is Turkey. Turkey played a central role in the effort to weaken Syria and overthrow the Bashar al Assad regime. Turkey's actions were guided by two key strategic objectives. First is to resolve the refugee crisis. Now, Turkey was host to a few million refugees from Syria, and this had created terrible economic, social, and political pressures on the government. So, by backing the rebel groups such as the Syrian National Army, which is made up of opposition members as well as former officers of the Syrian army, and also by funding Sunni militias such as the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, Turkey intended to create a buffer zone in northern Syria. This would allow refugees to return to Syrian territories controlled by groups loyal to Turkey. Number two is to contain the Syrian Kurds. Turkey saw the rise of the Kurdish groups in northern Syria, particularly the People's Protection Units or YPG, as a major threat. Turkey feared that the growing power of Syrian Kurds could inspire and embolden Kurdish separatist movements within Turkey's own borders, particularly led by the PKK or the Kurdistan Workers' Party. Therefore, supporting Sunni militias was Turkey's way of countering Kurdish influence in the region and in particular in his own country. The second most important external actor is the United States. The US and Turkey shared one common objective, that is to weaken the Assad regime and to keep Syria weak. However, they differed in their practice or approach to these objectives. The US supported Kurdish forces like the YPG to fight the ISIS. And as I told you just now, Turkey has a problem with these Kurdish groups, but the United States supported it for its own reasons. Although their methods and allies differed, the US interest in destabilizing the Assad regime aligned with Turkey's objectives. So, this destabilization of Syria was not a sudden or spontaneous development. For years, external actors, including regional global powers, had been arming rebel groups, funding militias, and providing political and logistical support to forces fighting the Assad regime. These coordinated efforts made it increasingly difficult for Assad to maintain control over Syria and fueled prolonged conflict that led to the country's collapse. The second core factor is cultural and religious divide. Now, you must remember that Syria is mostly made up of Sunni Muslims. However, the ruling regime, the Assad regime, is made up of Alawite, an offshoot of the Shiite Islam. So, you must understand this within the context of the broader conflict between the Sunnis and Shiites over the last millennium. So therefore, from the perspective of the Sunni Muslim majority Syrians, the Assad regime is seen as illegitimate and highly unpopular. The Assad regime maintained power through brutal oppression, using secret police, military crackdown, and widespread violence to silence dissent. You remember in 1982, there was an uprising in the city of Daraa, which was harshly or brutally put down by the Hafiz al-Assad government at that time by using chemical weapons.
In the last 6 months, the Syrian government has used warplanes, helicopters and ground forces to deliver chlorine and sarin in Damascus, Hama, Idlib and Aleppo. That's widespread and systematic use of chemical weapons, which could amount to crimes against humanity.
So these conditions gave rise to the rise of Sunni-led militias. Groups like Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS. For your information, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham previously was known as the al-Nusra or Jabhat al-Nusra, which was originally part of the al-Qaeda movement. This group, Hayat Tahrir al-Shams, is led by Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Julani refers to Golan, is to show that his family originally came from the Golan area. So this religious and ideological divide, combined with years of civil unrest, had created fertile ground for Sunni militias like the HTS to thrive and attract popular support. I've just mentioned one rebel group, but there are actually several others which have also been fighting for years. The third core factor is internal weakness, and this relates directly to the weak economy of the country. The Syrian economy was very inefficient. It did not provide enough employment, and the economy therefore stagnated. Because the economy was weak, there was rampant corruption. When I was ambassador in Beirut at that time, I observed that even some very important senior positions in the Syrian government, the officers earned as little as $50 a month. And because of this low wages, soldiers sometimes even defected from the army. So there was low morale, the economic collapse spread to the military, soldiers were apparently unpaid, and they were deeply demoralized. Therefore, the military began to fragment, and therefore the ceasefire years of the civil war from around 2016-2017 until today served as a test for Assad's internal strength. But instead of rebuilding, his regime grew weaker and more vulnerable. When external forces launched a renewed offensive, Assad's fragile regime collapsed almost without a fight. The fourth core reason is Assad's isolation. The final phase of Assad's downfall happened because his regime was isolated and vulnerable. Russia was distracted because Russia was heavily involved in the Ukraine conflict and couldn't provide meaningful support. Iran, another major supporter of Syria, had its own problems. You recall that Israel had wiped out the leadership of Hamas. Ismail Haniyeh had been assassinated in Tehran. Later, Israel bombardment in the neighborhood of Dahiyeh in southern Beirut finished off Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, and several other leaders, at least the first tier leaders of Hezbollah, had also been eliminated through the pager attacks. So Iran was basically bereft of support of Hezbollah because the leadership of Hezbollah and Hamas had both been decimated, and therefore Iran could not provide support. So in this moment of vulnerability, groups like the Hayat Tahrir al-Shams and the allies acted. Their attacks were swift, coordinated, perfectly timed. No doubt they were supported, provided with intelligence from both Turkey and perhaps other countries as well. And with Assad cut off from his main or strongest supporters, the rebels overwhelmed his regime. And as I had already told you, the army was demoralized. It basically did not put up a fight, and therefore the entire thing collapsed within days. So what happens next? Well, we have a fragmented country, and that is something that Turkey, the US, and Israel wants. They do not want a strong, united, and powerful Syria. So we have now Syria, which is divided among competing forces, creating a patchwork of entities which are in control in different parts of the country. The Hayat Tahrir al-Shams controls Damascus and the key western cities, which are basically the backbone of the country. The Syrian National Army, which is, I told you, comprised of the opposition leaders and also defectors from the army, as well as Turkish forces, hold areas along the northern border with Turkey. The Kurdish forces dominate in the east. Smaller rebel groups maintain controls in various parts of and pockets in the south. The United States maintains a particular zone in the southern part of Syria known as the deconfliction zone, and Israel has moved in to occupy additional territory along the Golan Heights. So, this fragmentation leaves Syria extremely fragile. It increases the risk of further conflict internally in the country and continued violence. Second is the millions of Syrian refugees who are planning to return home. We have seen reports that refugees all over the world, from Turkey, even in Europe and elsewhere, are now rushing back. They are hoping to rebuild their lives. While this return signals hope, it also risks overwhelming Syria's broken systems, and it most likely would add confusion and perhaps even fuel instability in the country. Number three is the uncertainty about how to meet the people's aspirations. You remember the reason why the Syrian civil war happened and why the regime was eventually kicked out was because of economic reasons. Life was no longer tolerable. People could not find jobs. Poverty was rampant. There was no future for many Syrians. So it was just not possible for them to continue living in those conditions. So they expect something new. Would Hayat Tahrir al-Sham be able to deliver this? What we have heard from the leader of this group is that they intend to introduce Islamic governance. Well, while that is probably a desirable rule when we compare that with Hafiz al-Assad or Bashar al Assad's repressive rule, but it does not directly answer the main grievances of the people. And number four, while there's so much uncertainty in Syria today, Israel had taken the opportunity to go and bombard over 300 targets all over Syria. They claimed that they were bombarding the military installations and military infrastructure to prevent them from falling into the hand of the so-called jihadists. But this adds to the dire situation in Syria, which is already crumbling under years of economic neglect. Now they have problems with the infrastructure, which has been destroyed in the civil war, and now Israel is adding salt to the injury. And number five, while we're observing the turn of events in Syria, there is a real danger of broader regional conflict taking place. Now, Iran is at the most vulnerable right now, for example. It has lost basically its ability to project power through Hezbollah and Hamas. It is now left with just the Houthis operating in southern Yemen. So this might just be an opportunity that countries like the US and Israel and others might take to try and destroy the Houthis and perhaps open up new fronts. Israel, or together with United States support, might think that Iran is vulnerable right now and it could be a potential target. So I started asking what happened in Syria. Well, what happened in Syria was not a spontaneous thing. It was a product of meticulous planning, testing, and execution. And as I have explained to you, the external actors like Turkey and US and Israel as well have an interest to keep Syria divided and weak. And therefore, they had used these rebels and other forces to divide the country and keep Syria's internal weaknesses were exposed and exploited over the years, and the regime had not done anything to improve the conditions of the country, had not done much to improve the economy of the country, and therefore it was plain sight for everyone to see that this was an aspect that could be exploited. And this has been tested and seen over and over. And number three, when the conditions were right, Russia was preoccupied with its war in Ukraine, and Iran had been destabilized with the loss of its support within Hezbollah and Hamas. The timing was perfect to push the rebel groups to overthrow the regime. And to aid it all, the military was just only too happy to step aside and let the rebels take over. So today we have Syria, which is divided, fragile, unstable, with no clear road to recovery. If anyone thinks that the future is going to be bright and things will turn out perfectly well for Syria, well, I don't think so. We have seen this happen over and over again. This country is divided. There is no one united view of uniting this country. Furthermore, there are enough external actors who want to ensure that Syria is always kept divided, even if it means that keeping a certain level of conflict in the country, like on a slow boil. So if you ask me, I think that we are in for a long haul. Syria is going to be unstable, and probably we might hear of intermittent conflicts here and there within the country that will continue for several years to come, until perhaps some clarity emerges, which probably we are not able to see today. If you like this video, please hit the like button. You have to do this for me, please, because YouTube wants to see the likes on the video so that you can show it to other people. Thank you very much.